Good night, then. Sleep to gather strength for the morning will come. Brightly will it shine on the brave and true, kindly on all who suffer for the cause, glorious upon the tombs of heroes. Thus will shine the dawn.
The year is 1940. The world has been at war for just under a year. Nazi Germany has managed to take control of several neighboring countries, such as Austria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Norway, while managing to have the Soviet Union turn a blind eye. The Allied forces who waged retaliation against the Axis in the West have been forced to retreat to northern France. Over 338,000 soldiers of French and British service have been routed off the land by German forces and over to the United Kingdom from the beaches of Dunkirk. 1 month later, on the 22nd of June, France signs an armistice with Germany, taking them out of the war and placing the country and west coast of Europe firmly into German hands. One month after France fell, German Führer Adolf Hitler sets his sights on his last remaining opponent, Great Britain. Unlike the other nations the Germans had invaded, Britain was located off the coast, surrounded by the sea. Normal blitzkrieg tactics wouldn't work this time, so as an attempt to starve and scare the enemy into submission, the Battle of Britain began. Instead of using regular ground troops or immediately sending an invasion force, Hitler decided to use his Luftwaffe Air Force to bomb the country into submission while also using his U-boats to destroy supply ships in the Atlantic Ocean in a separate event known as the Battle of the Atlantic. The Battle of Britain went on to last for 3 months, ending on the 31st of October as the Luftwaffe bombed at ports, airfields, and cities, including London, but were later repelled and routed off by the RAF and its air superiority. Realizing Britain wasn't going to fall, Germany turned its attention somewhere else: Russia. Starting on the 22nd of June 1941, 1 year after France fell, Germany, along with other Axis allies, launched the biggest military campaign in history, Operation Barbarossa. The campaign sends nearly 4 million Axis soldiers and thousands of military vehicles into the Soviet Union, killing and destroying all that stands in their way. The campaign is also one of the bloodiest, leading to millions of casualties from both military and civilians, with targeting specific groups being particularly common. The invasion starts off strong, with Germany reaching Moscow within the year, but was cut off against stiff resistance from the Russian capital and later German attention focusing towards another target: Stalingrad. While Europe was preoccupied with Germany and Italy, on the other side of the Atlantic, the United States of America remains in a state of neutrality, only giving supplies to Britain for them to remain afloat. Though the US tries to stay out of this war, one horrible mistake was made. The Empire of Japan, the third and newest main Axis power, who had recently been cut off of supplies from the United States, decided to make the first strike against the nation by attacking the American naval forces at Pearl Harbor. The attack was a devastating blow to the United States and left over 2,000 dead, along with many naval vessels and aircraft damaged or destroyed. However, though this attack was supposed to put America out of action through the rest of the war, it really awoke a sleeping monster. Back in Europe, starting in August of 1942, the battle for Stalingrad begun. The ferocity of this battle will shape the actions of the whole eastern front of the war. After the Luftwaffe pummeled the city with over 1,000 tons of bombs, over 2 million troops clashed in the streets of the city. In the streets, the buildings, even on the individual floors. Various accounts describe the battle as something unleashed from the depths of hell, with the dead strewn throughout the area and fire raging across the sky. While the German forces are locked in the center of the city, Soviet forces outflank their opposition and manage to completely encircle the German invaders. With help from some of the most frigid winter conditions, the Soviets managed to win the battle, humiliating Hitler, opening a new front in the war, and putting Germany on the defensive. In total, this battle alone had around 2 million casualties. Almost a year after being dragged into the war, America joins its European allies in Operation Torch. Starting in November 1942, this campaign sends the Allied powers into liberating Northern Africa from Axis control. This campaign will also be used as a test ground for devising the idea for D-Day with its amphibious assault and understanding the opposition. With resistance given from the German allied Vichy French, the Allied forces were able to take over Morocco and Algeria in 8 days, with Tunisia falling later the next year from stronger Axis resistance. In total, this campaign spanned the whole northern part of Africa, ended with just over 300,000 casualties. After the fall of Tunisia, the Allies started their invasion of Europe by invading the island of Sicily. Starting on the 10th of July 1943, the Allied forces launched an invasion into Sicily, paving the way into continental Italy and onto mainland Europe. Sicily falls in a month, allowing the Allies to stock up and prepare for another amphibious assault, which will be a tactic used throughout the rest of the war. While preparing, a coup d'etat takes place and deposes the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Though with Mussolini out of office, Italy's still shown to be a pain to take for the Allies, especially when dealing with the German counterattacks, the Luftwaffe, and the fortifications that lay in the road to Rome. After nearly a year since the invasion of Sicily and several lines of fortifications broken, the Allies made one final push for the Italian capital, breaking through the Caesar line on June 2nd and leaving the road to Rome open. After hearing of the Allied advance into Italy, Hitler decides to withdraw his forces from Rome to escape another Stalingrad. In the early hours of June 4th, 1944, Allied forces entered the historic capital, bringing the number of Axis powers down to 2 and opening the door to the most daring operation humanity has ever seen.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade, towards which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessings of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
The year is 1944. Germany has been put on the defensive to the east, and Italy has been taken out of the war. Even with these current fronts, Germany still holds control over most of mainland Europe. The idea to open a new front to the west, cornering Hitler, led to the creation of one in particular operation. The plan was so daring, so ambitious, it would become an icon in world history. This plan's name: Overlord. Unlike Italy, where an amphibious invasion was done with moderate ease, landing back in France was impossible. This impossibility was caused by one of the Nazis' greatest fortifications, the Atlantic Wall. This line of fortifications spanned the west coast of Europe, from France to Norway. Layered with over 150 coastal artillery guns, tons of coastal machine gun bunkers, ship-puncturing Czech hedgehogs, and hundreds of underwater mines. This wall was considered by the Führer himself as unbreachable. With this threat in mind, the Allies sent over 3,200 photo reconnaissance sorties to identify the fortification styles in any area to attempt a landing. After some time, the Allies found a likely candidate, Normandy. Normandy was shown to be not as defended as the northern French coast, such as Calais, where the shortest distance between the UK and France was located at the Strait of Dover. But just the lack of defenses won't be enough to secure the region. They needed a diversion. The diversion came in under the name of Operation Fortitude, setting up across from the Strait of Dover in an attempt to get the Germans into believing the invasion will start from Calais. The Allies set up an entire military force made up of dummy vehicles and equipment, even dummy buildings like hangars and airstrips for aircraft that were not even real. With Germany distracted by the fake army, the real force begins to form. The Allies, logistically led by Sir Bertrand Ramsay, who also commanded the Dunkirk evacuation, managed to move over 7,000 ships to assembly points opposite of Normandy. As a means to prevent Axis counterattacks at sea, naval screens were also set up, cutting off the English Channel. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower picked the date for the landings, June 5th. The Allies led the landings with 156,000 troops to take the selected beaches. Following the troops are 1,500 tanks, such as the M4 Shermans and Mk6 Centaurs, over 6,000 ships ranging from troop transports, battleships, and destroyers, along with well over 10,000 aircraft for support in deploying troops behind the lines. Some tanks that were involved were also used as amphibious duplex drive tanks, sometimes referred to as DD or Donald Duck tanks. On the other hand, the Axis side was comprised of over 50,000 troops spread out along the beaches, defended by the coastal artillery guns, machine gun bunkers, and previously mentioned defenses that were in place for such an invasion. The Allies had picked out 6 positions for the landings, 3 given to America, named Omaha, Utah, and a heavy gun position at Point du Hoc. Britain took 2 areas called Gold and Sword, while Canada joined in and decided to take position Juno. Right before the invasion was supposed to take place on the 5th of June, bad weather rolled in, causing a massive delay, setting the invasion for the next day, June 6th, 1944. After a full day-long delay, the landing was a go. Forces were airdropped behind the wall to outflank the German positions, along with clearing away attempts at Axis counterattacks and sabotaging enemy railways and logistics while the channel was being crossed at sea. One of these airborne units will end up grouping with forces at the Utah landing zone. Starting in Sector Juno, Canadian foot troops ended up landing before the armored divisions did, caused by rough seas, a pattern we'll see throughout the day. Allied forces tried to use offshore bombardment to destroy German positions, but failed to do so. Canadian forces, however, were able to secure the beach rather quickly, but ended up getting delayed before taking the city of Bagny-sur-Mer. For Sector Gold, conditions caused British tanks to move in closer than originally intended. Aerial bombardment also failed to destroy enemy artillery positions, leading to continued shelling for the rest of the day until the beach was finally taken after each artillery position was individually assaulted. For Sector Sword, British armor managed to safely reach the beach and support infantry efforts, leading to a quicker victory. However, later in the day, wind conditions caused armored forces to become less maneuverable, and forces trying to take the city of Caen were forced to withdraw from lack of armored support. Forces that captured both Juno and Sword also managed to hold off and repel a German Panzer Division counterattack that was planning on retaking the beaches. At Sector Utah, the current moved forces south of their intended target and caused forces to not reach their intended location within the day. Forces at Utah were able to link up and group with airborne units who were originally displaced due to lack of communication and equipment when they were sent out, which actually managed to confuse German soldiers, creating a slower response. The most defended sector, Omaha, was an interesting fiasco. Currents caused deviations and delays in the American troops being able to properly land on the beach. Being the amount of enemy fire these forces were taking before landing caused the Allies to put a hold on the landings, bringing in destroyers to provide fire support on that sector. Later in the day, German forces starting to run out of ammunition, giving the forces a way to make better progress and later taking the beach. Point Two Hawk is a story that seemed more like a Hollywood film rather than a World War II battle. 200 men from the 2nd Ranger Division had to scale up a 98-foot cliff with ropes and ladders while being fired upon to destroy a heavy gun position that was located at the top. When reaching the top, the Rangers realized the gun had been moved, only to find it unguarded 600 yards from the cliff. The group managed to destroy the gun, but were caught by a rock in a hard place and had to hold the area to survive. By the time support had arrived, only 90 of the 200 men remained. Immediately after the landings took place, the cities of Caen and Cherbourg were in a state of battle that would persist for a month, with Cherbourg dealing with an Allied naval bombardment against Axis weapon and fortified positions on June 25th. By the following day, on June 7th, the Allies had achieved the impossible. They have a foothold in Nazi-controlled Europe, but at a fairly high cost. The Allies suffered over 10,000 casualties, with over 4,000 confirmed dead, and losing up to 185 M4 Sherman tanks. On the German side, they suffered one hell of a defeat, at the cost of up to 9,000 casualties. The success of D-Day will be followed by an unprecedented breakout from the beachheads down the road to Paris, and then to Germany.
If the war is lost, the nation will also perish. This fate is inevitable. There is no necessity to take into consideration the basis which the people will need to continue a most primitive existence. On the contrary, it will be better to destroy things ourselves because this nation will have proved to be the weaker one. In the future will belong solely to the stronger Eastern nation. Besides, those who remain after the battle are only the inferior ones, for the good ones have been killed.
June 6th, 1944. A historic date in world history. Allied forces versus a very formidable enemy. Forces of Great Britain, Canada, the United States, helped out by other European nations tired of being subjected to Nazi rule, take on the once considered unbreachable defenses of the western coast, and prevailed. The Atlantic Wall has fallen, and the pathway to Paris and the end of the war is open. Immediately after the landings, battles commenced in the cities of Caen and Cherbourg to fully secure the beachheads and send the Germans running back to Paris. Cherbourg was especially vital to the Allies for its ports being used to bring in troops and armor. The battles themselves were not as quickly won compared to D-Day, with Cherbourg being bombarded by Allied naval forces on the 25th of June to destroy fortified enemy positions. The Battle of Cherbourg came to an end 5 days later on the 30th, and ending in Caen almost a week later on the 6th of August. With these cities in Allied control, the breakout from the region begins on its way to liberate France. Within a few weeks, Germans start experiencing harsh resistance from the Free French rebels starting on the 19th. 5 days later, on the 24th of August, Allied forces began arriving in Paris, helping the rebels and forcing the Germans to withdraw. The very next day, the 25th, Paris is liberated. During this time, British and Canadian forces kept moving forward towards the Seine River, on the route to the northern city of Rouen. Forces cross the Seine into the city on the 30th and meet up with Southern forces on the 12th of September, beginning the drive to the final line between the Allies and the German fatherland, the Siegfried Line. As a last attempt to chase off the Allies in the west, Hitler launches his last major offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. Located in the Ardennes forest connecting to the border with Germany, the battle lasted over a month, ending on the 25th of January 1945. The Allies suffered over 90,000 casualties, along with over 700 tanks and over 1,000 aircraft. The Germans suffered up to 100,000 casualties, along with hundreds of tanks and aircraft lost. Along with military losses, around 3,000 civilians were also killed during the battle. 2 months after the Ardennes battle, the Western Allies crossed the Rhine. In April 1945, the Soviets began entering Berlin, starting the final battle of the European theater. Later in the month, on the 28th of April, former Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, along with others close to him, were captured and viciously executed. A few days later, on the 30th, Adolf Hitler, along with his recently proposed fiancée, Eva Braun, commit suicide as a way to avoid a similar fate as Mussolini. After losing their Führer, German forces across Europe began to surrender, with the European theater of the war coming to an end on May 8, 1945, later to be called VE Day. Though the war in Europe had ended, another war raged on in the Pacific. The Japanese Empire, after waking the American war machine, stopped at nothing to deter their attacker, but ended up failing time and time again, with millions on both sides falling, and entire island populations resorting to mass suicide and martyrdom rather than surrendering. The US realized they had to do something other than invade the Japanese homeland. Instead of getting up to millions killed in a suicidal invasion, the US wanted something far more efficient, leading to the creation of one specific weapon. This weapon will become so deadly and so fearsome, its own development continues to shape our world to this very day.